Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another live stream from the Veg Grower podcast. It is Sunday, the 15th of January, 2023. Hope everyone out there is feeling very well. Now, this week I am talking about what seed potatoes are we going to be growing this year. I'm going to go through what I'm growing as well as find out what you are growing. I said a bit of homework last week, the mission, which many of you have tackled with great enthusiasm. So thank you so much. First of all, should we find out if anybody is actually out there? And straight away, Turbo Stream is out there saying good evening to the Veg Army. Ballycillion is out there saying hello to Turbo and goes on to say good topic this week. My potato seed order just arrived on Saturday. Fantastic. Oracle is out there saying hello to the Veg Grower Army and his friend Stuart Jackson on the other outlet. Kate Spratt is out there. Good evening, Veg Army. Good evening to you. Philly SPB is saying hello, everyone. Hello to you. Rebecca Hawkins. Good evening, everyone. Good evening to you. Gary Filler. Good evening to you. Hello from you. Rebecca is saying she's looking forward to finding out what potatoes we are all growing. Indeed, I am too. It's got to be said. Hargrave Gas is saying evening and a very one. And very one. Evening, everyone. Sorry. I hope you've all had a great week. It's going to get cold again this week. It certainly is, isn't it? It's already starting to feel a bit of a chill in here, but it is clear skies, which means we should hopefully keep the phone signal in good condition and get a decent live stream, unlike last week when everything just seemed to be letting us down. Chili Phil is saying good evening, everyone. Good evening to you. And Stuart Jackson is in the Facebook group saying evening, Richard and the Veg Army. Good evening to you. Nicola, evening, Richard and the VG Army from a cold, blustery, heavy rain, sleet and snow flurries. You got it all there, haven't you? Haven't you just? Digwell is saying buenos noches, amigos. I hope I pronounced that right. My Spanish isn't the best. Richard Golding, hello to you. Andrew Norris, good evening to you. George Howe is saying Desiree and Maris Piper for us. Straight in there. Fantastic. Jenny Hallett, hello everyone. Hope you are well. Margaret Peacock, good evening everyone. Digwell is saying, what's wrong with the Veg Grower podcast? Good picture and audio. It's the weather. It's the weather that is... on our side tonight and proving well. What else have we got? My dad, good evening to you. And Amanda in the Facebook group is saying evening all. Good evening to you. I'm really looking forward to hear which potatoes we are all growing, as I've not got mine yet. Stuart says Stuart. Good evening. I think I've said that to you. Jenny says, I've not chosen my potatoes yet. I would like to try a blue one, but not got pen and paper to hand. And hoping you guys will have some recommendations. Love new potatoes. Well, I hope we will. We'll get into that in just a moment. Brian's Garden Polytunnel was saying, hi, Richard and Steve. Good evening to you, Brian. Graham Arnold, evening all. I think, and Adrian is out there, of course. Good evening to you. I think that is everybody's, but please do let us know if you do join. Don't feel afraid to say anything. We're all very welcoming here and what have you. So this week's subject is all about what potatoes are you growing. And I've set this as a bit of a conversation piece because I noticed a couple of weeks ago that certain garden centres and supermarkets are starting to sell seed potatoes. Now, in fact, last week I did set a bit of a mission for everyone. Each week we set a mission, for a bit of homework, if you like, and quite a few of you actually set out and tackled the challenge. So let's go through the pictures that have been sent in to do with this mission. First of all, Turbo Stream, he found this collection in Wilkinson's. I can see there's some Pentland Javelin, some Rocket, some Maris Pear, and some Desiree potatoes. Plenty more, I'm sure, as well. Good collection to start us off from Wilkinson's. Stephen has been to Haskins, which I assume is the Haskins just down the road from me. I can't quite make out what there is. All I can tell you is they're $5.99 for a bag, and Haskins is usually a pretty good type of supplier, to be fair. Kate has been to B&Q, and again, she's found these in bags. I think they're about the same price as the one in Haskins. A good selection yet again. And Nicola has been to our local. Now, these are the type that I actually prefer, the pick and mix almost, where you take your pick of, or you fill a tab up and you pay per tub. That's my preferred way of buying seed potatoes. Jenny back in Wilkinson's as well, again, adding to the seeds potatoes that are going on in there. And finally, Steve, aka Digwell, has got his delivery from Bridgeend Garden Centre. I allowed this one because it is from a garden centre, so quite a good collection that are already available. Now, I'm quite surprised just how early these seed potatoes are out at the moment. I thought they were quite early, and last year the potatoes didn't seem to do too great, so I thought there might be a few problems. That's why I ran out and brought my seed potatoes a little bit. Well, as soon as they were pretty much there. First of all, let's see, back to the comments quickly. So George Howe is saying, I had a thought about using old car tyres to grow spuds in, but apparently this is a big no due to the apparent risk of leaching of chemicals. So I hear that quite often. I don't know. I'm no scientist, but I do hear the leaching of chemicals is a fear, and tyres are often banned from an allotment site for that very reason. That being said, people grow potatoes in tyres for many, many years. Whether it leaches, I don't know, but I would think it does. But instead of tyres, perhaps make a piece of wood that you can stack on top of each other to replicate tyres. That's the only way out I can think of. Bill and Val's allotment. Hello, hope you are both well. We hope to be growing Winston, Charlotte, Pink Fir Apple, and Condor. Bill and Val are actually on my allotment, I think I've said before. So good choices there, it has to be said. Kate says, for blue potatoes, Blue Danube are good, and I'll be doing those this year. I'm volunteering at a potato day soon, so I'm getting mine there. But I'll get Pink Fir and Charlotte too. Good choices. The potato days are coming more and more common, aren't they? I'm going to CD Sunday in a couple of weeks, and they usually sell a few potatoes at that event. But potato days, I don't know of any in our area, but it'd be good to go to a potato day. Now, TurboStream says, I'm undecided about potatoes again. Last year was rubbish. In truth, I don't think it's worth the trouble. Now, last year, I would say my main crops were rubbish, but my first earlies and my second earlies were pretty good. But I wasn't surprised about the main crops because it was such a dry year. I would personally say first earlies are well worth doing because you get a decent, tasty crop of potatoes that usually cost quite a bit of money. And also, you then clear that land quite early on that you can then plant leeks or something after the first early potatoes. So I wouldn't discount it, but it's up to you, of course. Sorry, not being anywhere near the garden centre this week, says Stuart Jackson. So I've missed the mission this week. Hopefully, get mine next week. I will buy mine in sets of 6, 2 bags of each variety. Well, Stuart, you will have to do twice as much homework this week instead. Brian says, I used to make rubber for tyres, awful chemicals. That was for George, who was talking about grown potatoes and tyres. So there you go, from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Somebody who used to make tyres, the chemicals are awful. I don't like the idea for that very reason as well. That being said, Jenny says, Hugh Richards uses tyres, but he uses them more to hold on up an old compost bag inside. That makes sense. But at the same point, it's not something I really want to do. Ballycillian says, Ramos for roasting chipping, Vita Bella for steaming boiling, and Sherman for bakers. I've never heard of those varieties. Are they ones that are only available in Northern Ireland, I wonder? But interesting, personally. Let's have a look. Nicholas says tyres are made from synthetic material, not rubber. Heard a radio present on BBC 6 who also said, under no circumstances grow veg or potatoes in tyres. Yeah, I mean, I avoid it, but I know people do it. Do it. Turbo Stream. Now, this is a good point, actually. Turbo Stream says, I don't know which variety is which. This is actually a very, very good point, because I've been into quite a few garden centres, quite a few shops selling seed potatoes this week, and I'm trying to find out what information they have. Now, these bags behind me are all my seed potatoes that I've bought so far, and I'll go through them in just a moment. These were really clearly labelled up as being first early, second early, or main crop, as well as if they're suitable for boiling, steaming, roasting, chipping, etc., etc. So most shops will have it on the labels what are the varieties are suitable for. That being said, again, you'll see when I come to those, it's very difficult to try and remember everything. The internet is your friend in that regards. Right. We'll come back to the comments. So, and we'll come back to the comments in just a moment because they're coming through thick and fast. Brian, actually, just seen this. You missed my comment earlier, Richard. Too early for potatoes, all dictated by shops' sales. See, you're right. I thought they were far too early, but then I think back in previous years, and I've actually seen them on sale at this sort of time of year as well. But because I was hearing there's so many stock or problems with stock this year, I wanted to make sure I got my potatoes in early and got them ready. You are right. I won't be planting mine till March the 17th. And in that time, we'll be chitting them. So, yeah, you are right. So, talking of what seed potatoes I'm growing, we'll go. Excuse the noise. We'll go through these. I've got 6 bags. These potatoes. I hope that's not too painful for you when I'm opening these bags. So this is a Maris Bard, which I think that's the second early. That's one of the varieties I'm growing. God, that's going to be really painful, I'm afraid, isn't it? That paper bag. I'm not going to move anymore, but what I've got, because of that noise, I've got, so Rocket as my first early. I've got Charlotte as a second early. The Charlotte are probably going to be grown in tubs because I'm doing experiments with them. We have got Acoustic, another first early, which is quite a good one, I find. Maris Bard, as I've just shown you. Then we've got Sarpo Myra, which is a blight resistant variety, main crop, and then King Edward as another blight resistant, not blight resistant, another main crop, especially for roasting and what have you. I've also not in here at the moment. I've got Jazzy, which is going to be planted quite soon and in the greenhouse, so I can get an extra early crop of potatoes, something I quite often do. One of my other favorites I haven't found yet is Home Guard. One of my favorite varieties of potatoes, that is. It dates back to World War II, and it is absolutely delicious and it is incredibly tough. So that's definitely 7 varieties that I will be growing, hopefully a few more if I can find them. I will be growing most of these potatoes down on the allotment in the ground. There will be some grown in tubs as well. I prefer growing them in the ground, far easier to look after and less watering required. But at the same point, I want to try and grow a few in a tub here at home just to try and balance things out. Rebecca says, last year, total rubbish for me, but the year before was outstanding. I was still eating potatoes in February. That's the fun about gardening. Every year is different. Yes, and it all depends on the weather. Like I said, it all depends on the weather as to what does well and what doesn't do well. Alison O'Brien says, you can use potatoes that are left over from supermarkets. I did try to grow some last year that grew nicely. They grew nicely and got some potatoes. Yeah. There's no reason why you can't. There are some potatoes that are treated to stop them sprouting, but I know we shouldn't be saying to grow supermarket potatoes, but I hear a lot of people do it with great success. Just going to quickly pot up the phone number. If anybody does want to call in, the phone line is open. Where do we go? Where were we? Kate says, I'm going to try and grow some bags this year for the potatoes, not me. Mine were tiny from the allotment last year, but according to the guys at the growers group, they had the same issue. It was Potatoes are very thirsty plants, and with it being such a dry spell last year, unless you were watering your potatoes on a twice a day basis during that real heat, they were going to suffer. As soon as I saw that weather, I knew it was going to be a bit of a bad season for potatoes. Mulching them does help retain a lot of that moisture in. So I always mulch anyway. Well, that's what I would recommend doing. Um, oh, Anna Jones, good evening to you. She's joined. And Digwell says, like any gardening idea, car tires are good or bad depending on where you read. Many permaculture sites swear by them and you expect them to be against them. Yeah, I mean, this is why I'm a bit on the fence, because I know some people will swear by them and some people won't use them. I won't use them. And the many allotment sites do ban them. So there's got to be something in that. But then permaculture, which is very much a very eco-friendly way of gardening, um, if they use them, what does that suggest? It's a very tough issue. Like I say, I'm no scientist, so I don't know the true facts if they do leach. Now, Jenny says, I'm growing my potatoes in the same buckets Tony O'Neill uses, big black ones. I have 10, so hopefully that's enough. I've got 10 I've probably got more than 10 actually, the same buckets as well. And I will certainly be using those to grow my potatoes in buckets here at home. Certainly my Charlotte potatoes. But I do find I do grow quite a few potatoes, so 10 isn't enough. Digwell says, I'm late chitting mine this year. I only did it today. See, I'm going to start chitting mine in the next couple of weeks, actually. This is where we can start this sort of conversation off. I've bought my potatoes. I've decided what varieties I'm going to grow. The Jazzy will be planted within the next week, probably next weekend. But the rest of these are going to be chitted. Now, where do you chit your potatoes when you buy them? Let me know how you go about chitting them. Brian says people buy now in case shops run out of potatoes. We've had that in the past, haven't we, where shops run out of potatoes. So I'm always worried about that. What else have we got? Anne Wright says Hampshire Potato Day was always in January. Sadly, it's no longer. Oh, that is a shame. I think there are potato days coming up. I think there's one in Liss at some point soon. Perhaps if Ian McCracken is watching, he'll be able to suggest when that is coming up. Ballycillian says, don't know, Richard. This is about the potatoes being Northern Ireland. But because of our situation, I got my potatoes from a supplier over here called Patch. They had a great crop last year. Do you find, and I'm throwing these questions out as I go along, but do you find that if you have a good crop of potatoes, you tend let me get my words out. You tend to stick to that variety year after year, or do you try and experiment with different varieties at the same point? Stuart Jackson is saying, I will be growing my spuds in Hessian bags this year. Then if they break down, I can compost to used bags. I'm trying to not use any new plastic in my garden, says Stuart. Yeah, I've used Hessian bags in the past, and I did find they broke down quite quickly. And I used to use as well in the past, those plastic grow bags for growing potatoes in. I got a good couple of years out of them, but after a while they just deteriorated. That when you picked them up, they just fell to pieces. So I don't use those anymore. Got rid of them because, I'm trying to move away from plastic like many of us. I either use those solid plastic containers or in the ground. Jenny says, last year I grew some Charlotte. Suddenly the leaves were covered in tiny, rusty coloured spots. What causes that and can it be avoided? When you say rusty coloured, are we talking red rust or black blotches? I don't know if there's such a thing as potato rust. My first thought would be blight, but could there be something called rust? Idaho Garden Girl has joined. Good evening to you. She's saying hello to everybody. And George got them in Not Cuts Garden Centre. I must have missed one of your comments. Sorry, George. Yeah, Not Cuts. I haven't been to that garden centre this week to find out. Turbo Stream, only tend to roast and bake spuds. So what would be good for that? Straight away, King Edward. King Edward and Maris Piper are usually a good, well, they're for chips, really. But King Edward would be my thought. But I'll throw that out there to anybody else. Good variety of potatoes for roasting and baking. Andrew Norris, my neighbour Tonya planted 2 varieties. One was completely grubbed up by wild pigs, but the variety that survived untouched was called, I think, Mona Lisa. Has anyone heard of this type? Personally, I haven't heard of Mona Lisa. Andrew is in Croatia, so it could be differences going on there, but I've not heard of Mona Lisa at all. But there are, 5,000 varieties did we discover on the Christmas day in the Christmas quiz? So, yeah. Right, Digwell is saying his first earlies are Casablanca and Winston. There we go. There we go. Rebecca says, when are you planning on sowing your ones for the greenhouse, Richard? I'm probably going to do those next weekend. They'll be in a big plastic tub in the greenhouse, and eventually they will come out the greenhouse when I need a bit more room in it. It's going to get very full in my greenhouse thinking about it. Yeah. Early as John, good evening, Richard. Saw some daffodils out on our walk. Too early for daffs? Snowdrops plenty, though. It does seem a bit too early for daffodils, but with the weather, it's no surprise at the moment, is it? Jenny says the best mulch for potatoes. Good question. What is the best mulch for potatoes? Personally, I use grass clippings from when I mow the lawn because I've always got it available. But one of the best ones that I've experimented with in the past is straw, because that rots down. In fact, you can grow potatoes in straw or compost, of course. Compost is a very good mulch. Don't forget the compost. So, yeah, that's 3. Grass, straw, compost. I'm going to grow what Stuart Jackson is growing. His spuds never fail. Yeah. What, Stuart? Good question, actually, Stuart. What potatoes are you growing at the school, or are you growing potatoes in the school? Kate is asking, we're covering in straw help for potatoes. Yep, that's a good mulch, as I just said. But Digwell does say anything except straw, hay, as they attract slugs. Goes completely against what I just said. But I think that does depend on where you are. Again, I don't have many problems with slugs and snails. So, yeah. Brian says, my chicken starts towards the end of February for earlies. Now, Brian, you are quite a bit further up north than me. So you probably are. I would normally start at the beginning of February. So that would make sense, 4 weeks behind. But yeah. Digwell says, chit anywhere that is light and cool. Dark and warm causes the sprouts to get spindly. Yes. So does everybody know what chitting is? If you don't, what we do is when we get some potatoes and we'll pot them with, let's go to, which one is it? No, not that one. We'll put them with these eyes up and they will start to grow shoots. And that just means basically they've started the early growth. And a lot of gardeners will do that. There's a lot of debate whether it's worth doing, but I always think they're going to do it anyway. If you leave it somewhere dark and warm, it causes that spindly growth, as Digwell says. So we might as well do it in a controlled environment because they're going to do it anyway. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. The biggest mistake I ever made was in the old shed, the sort of greenhousey shed, where I had all my potatoes in egg boxes, all stacked up on the shelf, all labelled, so I knew exactly what they were. And then something must have knocked them off the shelf because I went in there one day and all my potatoes were laid across the floor, all mixed up. I didn't know what varieties were what. And I'm a bit of a stickler that I have to keep the same varieties and everything's labelled, so I know exactly what is where. So that for me is something I'm always cautious about, is that they need to be labelled and somewhere where they're not going to get blown over or knocked over. They are probably going to go in my greenhouse, to be honest with you, somewhere light and cool. Although keeping an eye on the weather because we never know what is going to happen. Anne says, I always cover my potatoes in a duvet of straw. Brian says, I stick to the spuds I like the taste of. Probably one of the most important things, isn't it? The taste of the spuds that we grow. For me, I absolutely love the taste of these varieties that I've chosen. That's why I stick with them. The rocket variety that I grew last year, oh my God, were they delicious. They were absolutely delicious. Ballycillian, yes, but always try one new variety each year. In question, when I was asking if you stick to the same varieties. Digwell says, I have my favourites for eating an exhibition, but I try a new one each year. Excellent. Graham Arnold says scab. I think that was the rust-coloured blotches. Scab. You think that's scab, do you? Interesting one. TurboStream, I looked at my photo and you would think they would tell you if they were first early, etc., but it didn't. Yes. You are right there. TurboStream. I saw that in Wilkinson's. I noticed they didn't really have as good labels as the garden centres I went in. I'll get into that in a moment, actually. Leeton, the road to self-sufficiency. Hello and welcome along. I'll be sowing Charlotte first and second early, some in February in trugs so I can get them out in the frost. Then the rest in the ground in March. Main crop will be King Edward, Maris Piper, and Pink Fir Apple. Pink Fir Apple are delicious. Absolutely delicious. They grow really well on my allotment as well. I've just skipped loads of comments. So George Howie says, Home Guard, one of my favourite potatoes there. Jenny says, red-brown colour, tiny rusty-looking splots. It wasn't blight. It did match any blight photos online. Never found out what it was. I don't know. I think we need to see, Jenny, if this happens again, can you send us a photo and we'll have a good look at it and see what happens. Although Digwell says Septoria. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Right. There's quite a conversation going on. This is great. It's amazing how these things start the conversation off. Now, let's have a quick break for me because I've been sent a video from Digwell about the potato competition, which is coming up. It's a bit of an advertisement for a future video. So yes, an upcoming video out Friday this week where he announces the start of his potato challenge. If you want to get involved in that, watch his video on Friday and get involved. He mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, and it's definitely something that we are going to be keeping a close eye on. Talking of challenges, we a couple of weeks ago, just start going off topic slightly. A couple of weeks ago, we discussed about the alternative veg growers show. That's what we're calling it. We've been doing a lot of planning, a lot of things going on. Margaret Peacock has been really helping out a lot on that. We've set the date for the 15th of October. We've got a nice little flyer coming out with that, and then we're going to share with you all the details on that. But I think it was the 15th of October we set the date, but that's where we're going to be holding the competition. But more details to follow once we finalize everything on that. So Ballycillian says, I found the best mulch for my potato buckets was grass clippings. That doesn't surprise me. I love grass clippings. I use grass clippings all the time. Even though I'm growing less and less grass, I still want more grass clippings because it's such a good mulch. Now, Turbo Stream says we've persuaded him. He's come round. He intends to grow King Edward potatoes after our conversation. See, this is the power of this live stream. We can get people who aren't sure to then go and start growing their own potatoes. Don't forget, all these potatoes can grow in buckets. So if you are struggling with space, grow them in buckets, and then you can move the buckets out the way as and when you need them. Stuart says, we will grow a rocket as an early and hoping to grow King Edward as the main crop at school, says Stuart. Excellent. Excellent. Are they going to be in the ground or in buckets? Chili Kate has joined to say, hi all, sorry, bean peeling potatoes. We'll grow Charlotte in 60-litre tubs in the garden and Desiree masking and Maris Piper roasting on the allotment. Good choices. Desiree and Maris Piper, particularly Charlotte are just delicious. Turbo Stream, good question. Actually, does anyone know what a seed supplier does to make a seed potato? Yeah. The answer to that is basically when the farmers or the seed suppliers, they're growing these potatoes purposely to pass on as seed potatoes. They're not growing them for food, they're growing them for seed potatoes. And then they go into a storage, which is a big, huge barn with red lights so they don't sprout. It's quite an interesting, but they are just like a farmer grows potatoes for eating, these are literally just grown for seeds. Oracle says, has to be grass. The straw seems to attract the foxes to sleep on top of them. Good. There we go. So grass is another one. Well, grass is coming out on top. What do you think about chitting the potatoes? And once the shoots have firmed, cutting the potato in half to double the results. That's a very that's definitely something that used to happen a lot in World War II. So most potatoes, when they chit, you would get 3 chits, and people definitely in World War II, they would cut the potato in half or in 3s, let the cut just dry for a couple of days, and then plant that, so that you had 3 plants that could be planted. So it's a good idea, and it worked for World War II. So there's no reason why it wouldn't work. It's not something I've ever done actually. But it was definitely a way of trying to get more crops when people were really financially struggling. Lots of sorry, I'm missing a lot of comments, or there's so many comments coming in. I'm going to have to miss over a load to try and catch up. So apologies if I've missed your comment. But keep commenting, and I'll hopefully see what is going on. Leighton, the road to self-sufficiency. My mum used to cut them in half. I only chit first Ardies, the rest I just plant. Yeah, good. Talking of that, Digwell is saying what you were saying, Richard, is the seed potato challenge that he's set up. So for that, you have to cut them. So this is going to be a good chance to test this and see if it works. Well, it clearly does work. Now, Rebecca says, I always grow it in buckets as I grow at home and don't have the space. You can't beat the taste of homegrown spuds dripping in butter. Yeah, you're making me hungry. I've had my dinner already. All this talk of potato. And Idaho says, butter fixes a lot of food. Indeed it does. Indeed it does. So yeah, so there's a lot of conversation. Is anybody looking for any particular seed potatoes that they haven't found, or are they struggling to find any seed potatoes? From what I've seen I've been in lots of garden centres this week, just seeing what is available. I was going to make a little video up for it, but there was so much good response I didn't feel the need to. But there has been hundreds and hundreds of different varieties in garden centres. Saying that, I say hundreds and hundreds of different varieties, thinking about it, many of them were the same sort of 10 varieties, the ones that I've already suggested. Well, I can't think of any real different varieties in the garden centres, or any varieties that I've never heard of before. They are generally the King Edwards, the Maris Piper, the Charlotte. I haven't seen any international kidneys yet, but I'm sure they are out there. So our garden centres just sticking to the well-known varieties because they know they can sell them. That's an interesting thought I've got going through my head now. It wouldn't surprise me if they are, because they're doing what sells. Turbo Stream says, to Andrew, I did cut a couple of seed potatoes in half last year. I can't tell if they grew as it was so hot my harvest was poor. perhaps pot them up in a pot to ensure they grow. So this is a good thing with Digwell. Says the Digwell's competition that he's running, and all the details will come out on Friday on his YouTube channel. The winner last year grew 27 kilos from one potato. So by growing in one seed potato, cutting it into several pieces, perhaps that's how we can grow more to try and beat that 27 kilos. It'd be great if everybody anybody that can take part in this group could, because that would be great to try, and if we get the winner in our group, even better. Kate says the guy at the growers group said international kidney wasn't available this year due to bad seed crop. I was wondering that. I haven't seen them, and I was wondering that very question. Is there was quite a few varieties that aren't out there now. As I said, I've been in quite a few garden centres this week, looking around for seeing what seed potatoes are out there in research for this. And I brought 6 varieties, and I prefer the ones like this, where you get a bucket, a flower pot, you fill up your potatoes, and you take them and they pull them into a bag, and there you go. I prefer them like that because I can choose how many I want. I find the big bags just sometimes can get too many potatoes, and I like to grow different varieties. But the ones in the tubs work best for me. But I do have to write down what I've taken. So I usually write down on the bag and then try and relate from that. So that's how I keep it organized. One of the things that I've had a lot of trouble with this week going into all these garden centres is that it became very expensive. Went into one garden centre, and they had half price sale on. There was a lot of things that were discounted, shall we say. And I bought myself a new bulb planter, partly for planting these potatoes out, because what I do when I plant, or will be doing, is take a bulb planter, use it to create a hole, drop the potato in, and then throw the compost back in, throw the soil back in. But this garden centre also had veggie pods for half price. And anybody who knows veggie pods, I'm a big fan of them. A really big fan of veggie pods. I've got the small and the medium, and now I've got the large because I ended up walking out with a large veggie pod, and I couldn't say no because it was half price. I know quite a few out there have got veggie pods out there. Big fan of them. Such a good growing system, and at half price, I just couldn't say no. But it did get expensive going into these garden centres. Rebecca says this chit or not to chit is the big debate. It's a debate every year, and it's one I am running some experiments this year to see if there is any difference between chitted or non-chitted potatoes. But I just find it's too difficult to try and control that because of the fact that the chits are going to grow anyway. Jenny's asking, how do potato aerial tubers happen? Is that the tubers that appear above the ground? I'm not sure on that. Let us know. Ernie says, we buy potatoes from a local farmer named Les near Shearborn. Can't remember what type. My stomach doesn't react anymore, unlike the ones we used to buy from supermarket. See, supermarket potatoes can be 9 months old. I mean, let's face it, if you're digging potatoes out in October, how are you still able to get them the following June or July? The main crops, that is. Just they are stored. I mean, potatoes are very good at storing. Brian says, I've seen international kidneys for sale online. Perhaps that's where we have to keep an eye. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Jenny says, I know you have aerial ones to Digwell. How do they happen? I thought Digwell might know that. Adrian says, is the cost of living crisis affecting anyone, or is it media hype, as people I speak to and me are unaffected? This is something my wife and I has debated, actually. Is it really affecting people? I'm sure it is. Is anybody out there affected by this cost of living crisis? Gary says, thanks for the Sutton's offer link. I saved loads of money with that. You're welcome. That's a member of my supporters club. I had a Sutton's discount code that's available till midnight tonight. I can't remember what it is, but in the last email, it is out there. Brian says chitting potatoes is just a yearly habit for me. But Stuart says farmers never chit potatoes. It's a good point. Farmers never chit potatoes, but they are doing them en masse, so it would be difficult for them to chit potatoes. But like I say, they're going to chit anyway, so I feel if we can control it, it's better. Jenny says, Adrian, I've found food has really gone up, especially food for certain dietary requirements. Yeah, food has really gone up. Turbo Stream says, I doubt farmers chit their potatoes. I would think they would rub off during planting if they use mechanical methods. It definitely is. Definitely that does happen, and farmers definitely don't chit their potatoes, but we do at home. I'm sort of leaning more towards trying to test this theory out now and see if it does make any difference. Right, so aerial tubers, they form due to stem damage. The plant still produces sugars, but it can't get below the ground. It needs to store it somewhere, so it makes aerial tubers. Well, I've never heard of that, or I've never seen that myself, so that's a good one. Good, thank you for that, Dig Well. Turbo Stream says, Adrian, I'm okay at a tight ass. I can go into the pound shop and come back out with my pound intact. Yeah. I know how you feel. Digwell says some farmers do chit potatoes. They lay them out in sheds to start them off. There you go. I didn't know that. So some farmers, I'm having trouble with my words tonight. Some farmers do actually chit their potatoes. So there's a lot to be said about that. So let's have I'll give myself a quick break. We've got another video. Let me find it. Where is it? This is, yes. We'll go for your photo, shall we? Yes, it's that time of the week where we take a look at the photos that you have been posting on our Facebook group or sent to me directly. Gotta say, fantastic selection coming up. Now we start first of all with Rebecca and her picture of her plot. She says it's a little bit messy, but I don't see it myself. I think it looks absolutely stunning. What do you think? Next, Kate Harding has managed a couple of hours down on the plot, and it looks absolutely like it's been a beautiful day down there. Plenty of green going on. Looks warm, but I bet it was still chilly. Now, she has also chuckled to herself listening to the recent podcast I put out where I talked about my seed sowing station, because this is what she uses on her kitchen table. Next, we have Stuart Jackson. Now, his garden is too wet to venture outside, so it's indoor gardening for him, including sowing some of these seeds, which I think they're going to be destined or going into his veggie pod. Everyone knows I love a good veggie pod, and if you heard lately, I've managed to get myself a third veggie pod. More on that on a later date. Stephen Ticehurst joined us last week and mentioned that his allotment, here it is. It has been covered in wood chip, which is very difficult when it is so wet and muddy, considering it's at the top of a hill. And this is the plot from a beautiful view. You can see just how small it is, but at the same point, he makes a lot of use of it. Now, Greg, he only started his plot last April. He says there's always room for more improvement, but look at the changes that has happened in such a short time. Looks absolutely fantastic. Jenny has managed to get a delivery of a collection of seeds. She's very excited to receive these, of course, and by the looks of it, she's written out a nice little spreadsheet so she knows what's going on. Now, she's also made this joke: how's the allotment when it is covered in water? It certainly strikes how I feel at the moment. The only thing I feel we could grow this year so far is rice, but it will get better. She's been chopping and dropping on these two beds to tidy them up, as you can see here. Looks fantastic, I've got to say. Chop and drop is a method that I've started looking into a little bit more. And she's also been busy planting out some summer flowering bulbs with her Hori knife in tow. Absolutely brilliant. Now finally, Steve House, otherwise known as Digwell Green Fingers, he is gobsmacked at the price of Jack's Magic compost. Certainly seems to have gone up in price, but is it as good? Something we might find out. So please do keep sharing your photos. You can post them in our Facebook group. You can send them to me via social media, or you can email me, richard@theveggrowpodcast.co.uk. Cut off right at the end there. What a great load of photos. Absolutely, please. I love looking at them and putting that together. Please do keep posting your photos. It really is so nice to see them all going on. And there's so many to choose from. So many to choose from. Gary is also saying great photos are fantastic. And Jenny says great photos. Digwell says cool pics. So that has gone down really, really well. And I've got to say, I'm so happy seeing those. It really does look good. Yeah, so wrong one. Sorry, Rebecca said, I think the gas and electricity prices will affect us all, plus food prices and fuel prices. Sadly, wages not reflecting this. Talking about the cost of living crisis. I know that's something we're concentrating on the podcast, particularly. Yeah, it is a problem for many people. We are doing our best not to use any extra heating or electricity if we can help it. Easier said than done sometimes. Turbo Stream, it's noticeably more expensive to do a food shop, and I'm glad that I'm able to afford to buy it. Again, I have to agree. You know, we are lucky we can afford to grow, or we can afford to buy food. But at the same point, I'm still growing my own food because I want to grow my own food, and I want to grow as much of my own food as I possibly can. Now, Jenny says, Rob's allotment was on about soaking them rather than chitting the potatoes. I did think about not chitting, but I'm a creature of habit, so I'm sure I will chit. I can guarantee you I will chit, although I am seriously considering an experiment if I can work out how to do it, of whether it's worth chitting or not, and see if there's any difference. I'm of the opinion though that they're going to chit anyway, so I want to control that and make it do what I want it to do instead of what it naturally wants to do. That's just my opinion though, just my opinion. Digwell says he's going to send a photo of the aerial tubers to the Facebook group. That'd be great. And Idaho says, I'd love to see the photos. I love to see them as well. It's always good. Like I say, if you're not in our Facebook group, then please do go and check that out if you're on Facebook. There's quite a bit of chat going on at the moment. It's starting to become quite a good little group going on there. And I always see everything going on. I don't always comment because I want to leave it to everyone else to talk amongst themselves as well without me pushing my oar in. But yeah, it is becoming quite a good chat group. At that point as well, it's only right I ask if you would be so kind to give us a like, give us a thumbs up, give us a follow, a subscribe, and click the notification so that you know when we go live. That way, well, I don't get told off by Facebook and YouTube. Who's texted me? And what was the other thing I was going to say? That confused me there. Oh yeah, if you're enjoying this live stream, that's what I was going to say. Gary says, I agree, they will chit anyway. Is there an alternative? Don't know. I don't know. This is why I wonder if it's going to struggle to not chit. I don't think it will. Well, I think it will still chit, so I might as well. Ian Beddoes says, I chip my potatoes. Very good. Very good. Ultimately, that's why we're going to that's why we grow potatoes, so we can eat them. Fab photo, says Kate. Indeed. Yeah, really good photos that are going up. Please do keep those photos going. So yeah. So on this conversation of potatoes, I think you're all talking about what varieties you are growing, and we're talking about this chit or not to chit debate. But what other tips would you share with anybody about how to grow good potatoes? So I'm going to just talk about my timeline because I have a good idea of What the hell? I don't know if you heard that. There was a load of banging going on and squawking. God knows what it wasn't Roxy. She's indoors. Must be a cat or something. Um, anyway, my timeline of potato growing. So, beginning of February, I chit my potatoes and I start preparing the beds. In that, I hoe everything down. That bed did have field beans growing in them, the 3 beds. So I hoe those all down and then cover them over with either cardboard or membrane for the next few weeks so that everything rots down and into place. Come March the 17th, I start planting out my potatoes. I try and do it all on that one day. Doesn't always go to plan, so it could be spread out across a couple of weeks. First earlies definitely will go in on March the 17th, and then and so on. It's still banging going on. I don't know what it is. And then once they're in the ground, give them a good water. Not that they need it, but they're going to grow and they'll start to shoot. Once they start shooting, I obviously try and apply a mulch once they start growing, that is, and also a feed with a potato fertilizer. I do find potatoes are incredibly hungry, so they do need a lot of feed. About every fortnight, a handful of, or a few handfuls per bed of this potato fertilizer watered in and left to grow. And then come June, July, start harvesting my first earlies. July, August, my second earlies, and then August, September, October, my main crops. As easy as that to grow potatoes. The big thing I find is that mulching them really does work at protecting like holding into that moisture, protecting the potatoes from appearing above ground and growing green. So yeah, that's my potato timeline. TurboStream says, I think for me, the allotment is more for knowing where some of my food comes from than the cost of buying it. Having said that, my freezer has plenty of produce in it. I think that's true for many of us. Our allotment is about growing, or in many cases, organically. Not everybody grows organically, of course, but it is about knowing where your food comes from. For me, I just love growing my own food. I don't know what it is. It's just the way I like thinking about it. Jenny says, has anyone started their journals yet? Yep, I have. I really enjoyed keeping a note of this week. I hope I keep it up. Yeah, I keep my journal. I'm keeping it updated and writing it all the time, everything that I need to know. The best thing about chitting is you get to handle the spud and see if it is okay. Good point. That is a very, very good point. You do get to handle it and see if the spud, the potato, is okay. There's nothing worse that I feel there's nothing worse than when I stick my hand in the ground when I'm harvesting potatoes and it goes into that slimy potato. It really puts me off potatoes when that happens, and that's usually the seed potato that has started to grow. TurboStream, my journal tells me that I sowed penstemon, spinach, and parsley. Old cabbage was sown for microgreens this week too. You sowed that this time last year. Good, there you go. Spinach and parsley. Good. And old cabbage for microgreens. Excellent. Jenny gives a thumbs up. That'd be great. Rebecca says, I like to use a mix of manure and compost in my large pots. Manure and compost. So, well rotted manure. I used to exclusively just use some really well rotted horse manure. When I say really well rotted, it was like 2-3 years old. It was virtually like compost. And that was all I would use to grow my potatoes in. But one, my supplier for that no longer supplies the compost, so it's not easy to get hold of. But two, I spoke to a potato growing expert, and he said that excessive manure could lead to scab. So I don't know if anybody has found that in themselves. Too much manure can lead to scab. I think if it's well rotted, it should be fine, because I never really had trouble with it. TurboStream, hopefully I will keep up my journal, Jenny. Excellent. And Ballyslin, I always grow 6 buckets of extra early potatoes in buckets in the bed in the polytunnel where I will grow sweet corn. I will harvest June time before the sweet corn goes in. So this is the thing that I love about growing extra early potatoes, or even the first early potatoes, by the time they're all harvested, there's still time to use that bed for something else, be it leeks or beans or something like that. There's still time. So again, it just makes sense to grow more of uh, our own potatoes. So every now and then I've got to keep my throat lubricated, so I need a drink. So yeah, your potato growing tricks or tips that you would share, get those in the comments now as we carry on. Going to change the subject slightly, or discuss something that I'm going to ask you guys. Has anybody ever done straw bale gardening? I'm asking this because I built a new bed here at home yesterday. I say built, I basically threw cardboard and compost down on top of grass, and we're going to see how well that grows or how well that performs. And I'm looking, because I'm building 3 extra beds here at home, but on one of them was going to be the same sort of thing, cardboard and compost. But I've got an inkling now. I want to try straw bale gardening, and that looks like the best place to try it. Has anyone ever grown or did straw bale gardening? I know I spoke to the guy who invented straw bale, or claimed to invent straw bale gardening, a couple of years, 2020 it was, because it was during lockdown, on the podcast, and I've been interested ever since then. I've just got to find a supplier of straw bales. I think I can probably get them as long as they're cheap enough. I know straw has got quite expensive as well. So straw bale gardening is something I want to ask, has anybody ever done? Jedi Lurker, hi all. I grow my potatoes on St. Patrick's Day as I want to minimise any increase of blight going on my tomatoes. I'm going to grow Conda, Kestrel and Cara for the first time in pots. St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, like myself, that's when I always plant my potatoes out. I know a lot of people will do theirs Easter, but I find because Easter can move around, unless you're growing or gardening by the moon, I find that because Easter moves around, it could be sometimes late April or early March. I find March the 17th just to be that reliable day to plant my potatoes. Same time every year. Bally Soon says, Richard, when I used manure, I found the potatoes had more green growth and poorer potato harvest. Is that just pure manure, well rotted, or what? But that is interesting. Jenny says, I'm doing straw bale gardening this year. Excited to try. Fantastic. 2 of us are going to be trying straw bale gardening. Fantastic. Gary says, not straw bale, but my friend grew potatoes and grass clippings exclusively in a water butt. Heavily slug damaged, unfortunately. Interesting. Digwell says, scab is caused by poor watering. Too wet for powdery scab, common scab to dry. Yeah, I mean, the guy who, I can't think of his name. He's very, very well known in the gardening community for his potato growing. He's down Cornwall way, and I can't think of it. But he did a talk at CD Sunday, and what he didn't know about potatoes wasn't worth growing. And I just said to him at the time, I grow all my potatoes just in a very well watered horse manure. Is there going to be any problem with that? And he said it might lead to scab, which I don't know. I never had it, but interesting point. Gary says, I get a lot of scab did well. That's good to know. Poor watering. Indeed. Jenny says, remember to condition the bales first before planting into them. Not important if you are using them to surround compost. Yep, I've been reading that a lot lately on how to do that, or since I came up with this idea. Chicken manure pellets, Richard, for potatoes. Yep, chicken manure pellets are also a good one to add. I've got to get another tub of chicken manure pellets. I'm running out. Do use chicken manure pellets a lot. Idaho says, I got AeroGarden hydroponic at Christmas. I mentioned on another live stream, and other gardeners replied on me saying it's not organic. I searched online, and nutrients are minerals. Anybody have an opinion? So, AeroGarden hydroponic. I'm not familiar with that particular type. I can't if it's organic fertilizer, then I can't see why it wouldn't be organic. Um, I guess the difference is if it's chemicals are used or not. So don't know. I don't know that particular one. Well, ask anybody out there. Area garden hydroponic, organic or not? Um, Haley Davis, hello. Hope you are well. I've tried straw bale gardening, wasn't very successful. I grew the plants onto a good size, but when I popped them into the bales, they didn't grow anymore. They didn't die, just stopped completely. I didn't get organic bales, so maybe there was some pesticide in there, is the only thing I can think of, Haley. Um, that's interesting. That's very interesting. This is all what I want to find out this year with this straw bale gardening. It's something that's been in the back of my mind for a couple of years since I spoke to the guy. I interviewed him on the podcast. So it wasn't successful, but it could have been pesticides. That makes sense. It certainly does make sense. Well, again, this is what we're going to find out. Rebecca, I've started looking at gardening by the moon. Does anyone have any knowledge of this? I know there's one person who has dipped in and out of gardening by the moon, I mean, every now and then. So that is the only person I know. A lot of people swear by it, so there might be something in it. And of course, the moon does affect our waters, or the tides and what have you. So there could certainly be. I think there's definitely something but in it. But Rebecca, if you do gardening by the moon, that would be great to document out on like the podcast and see your journey with it. If that's something that's interesting of interest to you. Digwell, my organic ones available here for hydroponics. Liquid seaweed, for example. That's what I thought. And I have two aero gardens. So he said, Digwell said it's organic. Hargrave, yes, I got a lot of scab last year and I didn't water enough, so that makes sense. Yeah, it definitely does make sense. I mean, let's face it, last year was such a dry year, it was going to cause problems with our potatoes. I said quite often tonight, potatoes like a lot of water, a lot of water. Um, they're very, very thirsty, hungry plants, so they do need a lot of work, a lot of water, a lot of feed. So, yeah. Turbo Streams, not sure where I would buy a straw bale in Birmingham. There must be some farm supplies, or even you'd be surprised where it does sell them out. I'll put it like that. I've looked into it. They're about £6 a straw bale, I believe. So I'm sure there will be somewhere, probably on the outskirts, especially near the NEC, that does sell them. Ballycillian says, I'm well north, Belfast. I leave my outdoor potatoes till April Fool's Day. I've been caught out with a late May frost when planting on St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, I mean, I can see a late frost being a problem. Again, what I do with that, just keep an eye on the weather and keep some membrane to hand. But again, with a good mulch, I find that they do tend to get away with um, a good mulch. They tend to get away with frost. So yeah. Aero Garden is a tabletop hydroponic system for those that don't know. Thank you. I thought it was. And Digwell says I got mine from Amazon. What straw bale are you talking about there? Sorry. I didn't. Oh, that's a point. I didn't think of checking Amazon. And Costalis from Canada, just tuning it in. We'll watch later from the beginning. I've only ever grown red and purple potatoes. Love them. Yeah, I grew potato. What was it? Purple Majesty a couple of years ago. They were interesting. I can't say they were anything that really made me excited about the flavour, but the colour was certainly interesting. Gary says I would be interested in gardening by the moon too. So there's interest in gardening by the moon. Like I say, I know somebody did try it, or dipped in and out is probably the best way to do it, describe it. If you know who I'm talking about, you know who I'm talking about. So I've never really seen it in action, but I think that there's got to be, or there is some science behind it, or there's some logic behind it. Turbo Stream says, interesting, Digger. I suddenly would have looked at Amazon for a straw bale. I didn't even think of that. So I'm looking at. Brian says, I used to go by the moon but stopped. Couldn't see what I was doing. Yeah. And what if the moon goes behind a cloud? You know? So Digwell says, if you water your potatoes with a molasses solution a few times, then the bacteria, etc., try to outcompete the scab bacteria. So isn't molasses a type of sugar? I'm always confused. I hear molasses mentioned a lot, but is it a type of sugar? Or is it, or where do you get it from, or can you make it yourself? Chili Cake says the Soil Association doesn't recognise hydroponics as organic in the UK at the moment, at least. Well, of course not, because it's growing in water and not in the soil. So that probably is where it's coming from. Actually, is because it's not recognised because it's hydroponics and not in the soil. So that doesn't mean it's not organic. I know a lot of farmers who grow organically but can't afford the organic certification, so they're still organic, but they can't be classed as organic. So, yeah, uh, what is it called? Politics that go behind it. So, yeah, um, 18 £18.65 for straw bale on Amazon. It depends how big the straw bale is. That seems a bit on the pricey side, but I could be wrong. I've only really quickly looked into it last night. Who's prepared for snow this week, says Ian. Um, yeah, we're meant to have snow from tomorrow. I don't know. All I care is that we've got clear skies tonight, and that's let our phone signal work incredibly well this evening. It's been a good show. Digwell, forget gardening by the moon if you have raised beds. It makes sense again because of the pull of the moon on the water. It's going to cause that water to go there. Right, I've got one more video I want to show you, which I'll quickly do. This is our sow along. We're sowing seeds each week, and last week I said I was going to sow leeks. Right, well, as I promised, this week we're going to be sowing some leeks. The variety is Leek Bulgarian Giant, and I always use these polystyrene boxes to start off my leek seeds. These polystyrene boxes, they are used to transport fish to like restaurants or schools, so you don't have to use them. They're what I use, and I find them to be a really good thing to use. I fill them up with compost, and then all we're going to do is scatter a few seeds over the top. I'm going to try and get them evenly spaced, which is easier said than done because they're quite dark and small. They're hard to see in the compost. And then we're just going to sprinkle over a bit of, I'm using seed compost with added perlite just over the top, just to give them a very, very light covering. There we go, that should just about do it. And then what we'll do with this is we'll place this down on the ground in here. Usually I put a bit of polythene over, clear plastic, just to try and keep the moisture in there. Whether I bother with that or not this time, I don't know, but that's what I usually do. And we'll leave these to grow. We can sow these right up until about May, and I'm probably going to be sowing more as we go on over the next few months as well. Added to that, so last week we sowed some chilies. They haven't done anything as of yet. They're sitting indoors on the windowsill waiting for them. Week before we did some onion seeds, and they are just starting to show signs of life. So yeah, our seeds are moving along. Now, next week we're probably going to sow some tomatoes, I think, or should we do cauliflower? Let me know what you want me to sow next week, cauliflower or tomatoes. Choice is up to you, and I hope you join me with that next week. There we go. Yeah, so tomatoes and cauliflower next week. It's up to you, yeah, as towards the end of this week's show. So, Turbo Stream, Garden by the Moon sounds like a soft rock album title. It's got a certain ring to it, hasn't it? Gardening by the Moon. As I said, if Rebecca does do it, it'd be great to see and follow the progress. Margaret Peacock, molasses is black treacle. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've heard so much of molasses, but I've never looked into it. So this is interesting. Digwell says the reason I brought for Amazon is I didn't want the bale in my car. I know how you feel on that, but I'll use the work van. I'll use the work van. Um, but at 1865 a turbo stream 1865 from Amazon, I will pass on the bale of straw. I saw it around £7 when I was looking into it, and Stuart Jackson says straw bales don't pay any more than £7. So and Brian also says the straw bales on Amazon aren't as big as you think. I bought 2 last year. I want to buy 3, so I'll probably go down to where I get my chicken feed from and try and get some straw bales from there. It's the only place I can think of that I could get straw bale at a decent price. Rebecca says, yes, molasses is sugar. That's what I thought. So we'll find out for that. Jenny says, best place to buy bale is ask your local stable farm. They'll have a great contact. That's where I think I got it's sort of like a farm supply. It's where I get my chicken feed from. That's where I'm sure I've seen straw bales there, and I will probably get some from them March time. Digwell says molasses is a nutrient-rich byproduct of sugar refining. So it is basically sugar. So yeah. Gary says cauliflower. And Jenny also says cauliflower. I won't sow tomatoes until March. So far, 2 votes for cauliflower next week. Kate says, I contacted the local farm shop and they are selling bales much cheaper. Yeah, excellent. So local farm shop. Digwell says £10 at my local farm shop. So I think for straw bale gardening, it is a case of going to your local farm shop, farm supplies, and getting them. The difficulty, of course, is carrying them in the back of your car. Tarpauling is the only way around. Cauliflowers, I sowed some last week that are up and growing. Turbo Stream says already. That is pretty good. Pretty good indeed. Turbo Stream, we do have a stables nearby. I cycled past it on Friday. There you go. You were wondering where in Birmingham you would get straw from. It just goes to show it is there. Kate says £5 straw, £6 hay. Brian, the straw on Amazon is barley straw with seeds included. We don't really want seeds if we can help it, but it does look like we're going to be trying to find it. Haley says maybe a good idea to bale the bales soon so they can sit for a while to get season. I did wonder on that. But I was worried that are they going to be sitting for too long before I need them? I know we've got to add loads of feed and water to the straw bales, but I did think, are they going to be sitting for too long before we actually need to start using them? I'm looking to really start growing in them sort of April time. So, yeah. Another vote for cauliflower. So I think it is going to be cauliflower that we do in the grow along next week. Digwell, it's all about availability. On a bad year, bales are dear. When a farmer wants to get rid of a surplus, they are cheap. Yeah, that's markets for you, though, isn't it? It's the same as everything that we grow. You know, good years and bad years, more or less. Jenny says rectangular bales can fit in large Christmas tree bags for clean car and easier moving it to the garden / plot. There we go. I didn't know that. A large Christmas tree. But I don't have a large Christmas tree bag, but they can fit in that. I mean, when I buy straw, I usually buy it for the chickens in small bags because it's just easier to keep hold of. I don't want to buy big bales to stick in the garage when the chickens only need a certain amount each week. But yeah, the straw bale garden, it seems to be interesting, everyone. Gary says, I made the mistake with mulching my strawberries with barley straw and seeds last year. Yeah, but it's got the seeds in it. In fact, I think, that makes sense. I think I did the same sort of problem as well. Yeah. Brian says, true. Brian also says, hay has to be well watered and fed before use. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking of getting mine in March and start watering and feeding it from then on to condition it before it's ready to use in April, sorry. Adrian says, ask a local farmer. It should be no more than £4. Adrian, obviously a sheep farmer, so he knows knows the best places to go near him. Rebecca says, if I ever manage to grow a cauliflower, it will be a miracle. Cauliflowers are probably one of the hardest vegetables to grow. I'm not a great lover of cauliflowers, if I'm honest with you. We had something we were eating the other day. We were like, Amanda was like, oh, do you want cauliflower with it? Because it's in the freezer. And I was like, I really cannot get excited about cauliflower. I love my veg. I absolutely love my veg, but cauliflower is just one that I'm like, can take it or leave it. But it is one of the hardest vegetables to grow, granted. What I do find with cauliflowers is that it's best to sow them around this sort of time so that when they do grow, they produce a head before the heat really sets in and they're less likely to bolt. Haley says some people do leave them to sit all winter. Seasoning them from new takes a lot of water. Better to get head start free and east, in my opinion. That makes a lot of sense, Haley. So thank you. Perhaps in a couple of weeks' time, I'll go down to down to the place and see how much they charge and what have you. You are, yeah, you're talking from experience. So I've never grown it before, so I'd like a bit more for it. Gary says, keep going, Rebecca. It was the same last year, and then the magic happened. I seem to remember you sending a photo about it, Gary, actually. Yeah. What else have we got? I managed to grow 3 very small cauliflowers one year. Core blimey, indeed. And Jenny says, cauliflower steaks with paprika and cheese are amazing. I know what you're saying. A lot of people go on about cauliflower steaks. I couldn't get excited. I will try with paprika and cheese, though. I'll give it a try. I prefer my steak to be steak. You know what I mean? I like, we had steak last night talking of steaks, but cauliflower, I just cannot get excited about cauliflower. Even cauliflower cheese, I cannot get excited about. Chili Cat, I planted my first ever cauliflower 2 weeks ago. They've just germinated. I'm very excited. Yeah. Good. You know, they are good to grow if you can get them to. They are the hardest vegetable to grow, in my opinion, anyway. The centre of the bale has to begin decomposing before use for the straw bale garden. Yeah. And then Digwell says, turn the cauliflower upside down and hollow it out. Fill with anything like a stuffed pepper, etc. Then bake it. So stuffed cauliflower. That's sort of getting me a bit interested now. That does that does get me interested, indeed. Digwell also goes on to say you need to pee on the bales to start them rotting. I know that's not meant as a joke. That is being genuine because there is a lot of science that suggests that peeing on the compost bins helps the rotting process as well. So, yeah. Jenny is wanting an invite from Digwell for dinner. There you go. That does sound like a very interesting dish, to say the least. Right. Before we carry on, we've got the Veg Grower Army mission of the week. As I said last week, I set the mission for you to go into your local garden centre or your local Wilkinson's or B&Q and see what seed potatoes are available. And that you came out in your droves and absolutely found plenty that are out there. So for this week, my mission is I want you to go through all the gloves that you have, your gardening gloves, that is, and tell me how many pairs of right-hand gloves and how many pairs of left-hand gloves do you still have, or what or is one hand more worn than the other? Now, I'm trying to tie these missions in with the conversation for next week. Next week, the conversation that I'm hoping to do is what do you wear when you're gardening? What clothes do you wear? Now, this could be right down to wearing boots, your hat, or hoodies, etc. Just a bit of what do you wear? What do you wear on the allotment? or what do you wear on the gardening while you are gardening? Next week conversation. Digwa's got to go, so I'll see you next week. You take care, my friend, and I look forward to seeing what happens on Friday with your challenge. Gary says wetting the boughs and seasoning them sounds like it might encourage germinating the seeds and stop them germinating in my strawberry beds. We'll try that next time. Well, what I'm thinking with the straw bales is that at the end of the year, when they are pretty much rotted down, I'm going to use them to mulch my rhubarb, etc., etc. That's what I'm thinking with the straw bale gardening. And also, I think it's going to be a cheap way to build a new garden bed and see if strawberry bale gardening is as good as people make it out to be. I'm pretty sure it will be. It's whether or not it's going to look neat and tidy enough in the garden to really pull it off. We'll find out. We'll find out is what it's all about. So we've got 9 minutes to go for this show. It's been a lot of fun. The conversation has been fantastic. We're talking about what potatoes we're going to be growing this year. Don't forget to keep us all informed with what potatoes you are going to be growing and your progress throughout the year of potatoes, videos, photos, etc., etc. Of course, I will be sharing them and my progress as we go along. Turbo Stream says the challenge of the week is remembering the challenge of the week. Usually remember on a Sunday morning. If you are part of the Facebook group, I usually put a post. Last week I put a post up in there. I can put a post up on YouTube, on the pictures at YouTube or the community tab at YouTube as well, I guess, and also on the Facebook page and Instagram too. Actually, thinking about it, I could do that if that is any use if I'm trying to remember. I know it's a lot of things we have to try and remember, especially me, but I'm just trying to add a bit of fun to the live show, get everyone involved and take part. Jenny says if you bale garden in the polytunnel greenhouses, they can last 2 to 3 years, so that's super cost effective, and they make an amazing mulch and great moisture restraining. So yeah, moisture retaining. Yeah, again, this is what we're going to find out. It's going to be a lot of fun just finding how this straw bale garden really works and how good it produces. Turbo Stream, I don't use Facebook, so it's a challenge. I could probably, like I say, I should put the picture up in the YouTube community tab or whatever it is to try and help and make it better. Ian McGorgan says, yes, I have loads of gloves that I have to sort out. I thought as much. I had a feeling. I had a feeling that everybody would be thinking the same as me. I've got boxes full of gloves that I just, and it's always, no, I'll save that for next week. I'll save that for next week. Ballycillian says, I know it's not much, but it's great the daylight is getting longer every day, isn't it just? Come home from work a couple of days this week and it's still light. I've managed to get outside, check on the chickens, because usually they've gone to bed when I come home. So actually being able to see those when I get home from work is great. And just a couple of minutes in the garden as well. It's this weekend, I mean, we've done quite a bit of gardening this weekend because weather has been good. So yeah. Gary says, I have no gloves. I lose them all. Just bought a load on Amazon. And there we go. So yeah, all good fun. I think this week's homework, can't wait for the results. Stuart, I know mine will be interesting. I think that's Stuart. Yeah. Yeah. I won't get too much into it. Just like I say, have a look at your gloves. So how many pairs of right hand, or how many right hand gloves and how many left hand gloves you actually have. Turbo Stream, some daylight now at 44:45. Yeah. Jenny, is Nicola not here tonight? She was here. I'm hoping she's still out then. She's okay. So she is here. How many of us buy gloves, then take them off so you can work better, says Stuart? That's something we will discuss next week, that very, very subject. How many of us actually wear gloves when we're gardening? And but that's going to be something we'll discuss next week, like I say, when we discuss what clothes you wear. Same as boots and welly boots and so on and so on. Yeah, lot of questions on that front, isn't there? Right, guys. For a few minutes left to go, has anybody got anything they want to add about what potato varieties they are growing? Anybody got any last minute questions they want to quickly throw in before we close up for the evening? I've got a podcast coming out tomorrow, of course, where I'm talking about what leeks I'm growing and all my challenges or my experiments that I'm running this year. A couple of videos coming out, one from basically a couple hours on the allotment today, one where I've started building a new bed here at home in between rain showers, so it's a bit of a quick rushed one, and hopefully we can get some reels and other photos out this week as well, because everything's just starting to come together. Gary says, question, is first early Charlotte any different to second early Charlotte, or early versus main crop of the same variety? So this is a good question, actually. Some varieties of potatoes can be, first of all, they can be harvested as first early potatoes, but they can also be left to grow into bigger potatoes to become almost like a main crop. Home guard is one that falls into that. You can harvest them early when they're small and they taste like salad potatoes, or you can leave them to grow and they become the larger main crop potatoes, which are good for mashing or roasting, or when you want the big potatoes. So yeah, good question there on that one. Toby Stream, have a great week, everyone counting gloves. Just to add to Gary's question actually as well, what the main difference is that obviously when early potatoes, the flavour is always better when they're smaller, I believe. As they get bigger, they do lose a bit of flavour, but they still taste just as good, or still tasty, I should say. They're just bigger, basically. Jenny says, is it best to keep potato buckets together or spread them out, thinking about blight, etc.? Well, when I put my potatoes in the ground, I usually give 30 centimetres to 45 centimetres of space between potatoes. So with potato buckets, you're almost getting that 30 to 45 centimetres space just naturally. So again, I would give them a bit more room, but blight is a soil-borne disease. It just splashes up in the rain. So if you're going to get it, it's going to be all over. It's not like it spreads. It's not spreads from one to another as such. Andrew Knight says, night, everyone. Take care. And thanks, Richard, for hosting the show. Thank you for joining us, Andrew. Always a pleasure. Ian says, how many wash day gloves? We'll save that for next week. Adrian says, good night. Gary, thanks. Interesting. So, yeah. Rebecca says, I've always kept mine together with no problems, Jenny. Talking about the buckets of potatoes, keeping them together or close together. I'm thinking about when I've done mine, I've always kept them close together and not really had any problems. But I think adding that mulch, that extra layer of some sort of mulch, be it compost or be it straw or grass clippings, also helps to reduce the risk of blight too. So yeah, good questions going on there. Good questions indeed. Right, guys, I am going to bring that back here. I'm going to start packing up now. It is time for me to head on in and retire for the evening. Before I go, Balancing, is there something wrong with me? Called into a hardware store for a brush and came out with 4 packets of seeds. Can't help myself. No, we all do it. Jenny says, thank you, everyone. Off to make my spud list with a coffee. And Hargrave Gas says, thanks for another great week. See you all next Sunday. Indeed, next Sunday, talking about what clothes do you wear on the allotment. Well, you take care, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. Have I done that? Yes, I have. It's been a lot of fun again, and it's been interesting to see just what you are all growing. We'll be back here next week, Sunday at 6 p.m. Don't forget to like on your way out. Don't forget to give a thumbs up, follow, etc., etc. Take care, guys, and I'll speak to you again next time.